But let's start in the top flight in the Canada Life Premier League with a club close to Tony Mepham's heart, Corinthians, because they were chasing a sixth successive win against the Laxey side, who have had a brilliant start themselves, only lost 2 games, only lost to Russian and St Mary's, the sides who sit above them in the table. So you could have been forgiven for thinking it was going to be very close today, but in reality it wasn't, was it? Corinthians 6-0 winners over Laxey. Red hot form from the Whites, Tony.
I have to be honest, Chris, I was quite nervous about this game, and I went up to Ballafletch on my way to Union Mills and had a little bit of a yarn with Johnny Palmer, a bit of banter, and it was set up for a great game of football, and by the sound of it, that's what the Corinthians supporters got, because they played really well. I'm sure we're going to get sort of comments coming in against what I'm going to say now, but I can only go from what people you trust tell you, that it could have been a lot higher. It was some finishing that wasn't quite there for Corinthians, and also some great goalkeeping by Rob Slinger at Laxey. So yeah, it finished up 6-0, 3-0 to Corinthians at half-time. Steve Whitley, Conor Gorman it was who got the first, Steve Whitley got one, and then Sean Doyle, so looking okay at half-time. And then the second half, Denny Gerrard got one, Steve Whitley got his second, and Josh Ridings completed the scoring with the sixth. What's sort of more impressive is no Ryan Burns, no Tom Smith at the back. So Stewie Smith stepped up from the combination, and Stewie's been like a player-manager for the combi, and fair play to him. Stewie just said he didn't want to take the manager's role on because he still feels he's got something to offer for the first team, and Stewie did that today. Played really well by all accounts, and a great result for Corinthians. Disappointment for Laxey. It's not all doom and gloom. I think if you'd have given Laxey's faithful supporters and management team where they are at the moment, challenger for Railway Cup, I think they would have took it. As you rightly say, the games that they've lost against the two sides above them, but Corinthians today was another one of those top sides, and unfortunately today it hasn't happened for them, but I'm pretty certain Laxey will still chip away for the remainder of the season.
What is the mood like in the Corinthians camp at the moment, Tony? Because on the first game of the season, a 3-1 defeat to St George's, a lot of football fans are temperamental. Lose one game, it's a very bleak outlook. Win one, and it's very positive. 6 wins in a row, playing absolutely fantastically. You wouldn't want to come up against Corinthians at the moment, would you?
Well, it's a huge game next week now, isn't it? It sets it up nicely for St Mary's against Corinthians at the Bowl. And, certainly Corinthians, I did say right at the start of the season to you, Chris, that I saw something different this season at the start, similar to what I saw 2 years ago, where they finished second and won the Railway Cup and won the FA Cup. And I think the strength in depth now is more than ever before. There's a lot of players that could come into that first team and stay in that first team because they're good enough. And I think where it could have collapsed a little bit was when Danny went away to live in Ireland, and Blaine came in. Nothing against Blaine, but how the players' mindset would take to it. But there's a lot of experience there on that sideline. Ben Qualtrough, Steve Burns, you've got Juan Watney as well. And between the four of them, it's coming really good. And I watched the training on Thursday, and when you're seeing sort of high spirits and everything, it just shows that you're playing with a lot of confidence. And when you've got sort of Ireland players in there like Steve Whitley and also Sean Doyle, Cameron Lee's been absolutely immense this year. Matthew Quirk's hitting top form as well. It bodes well for the season, but the big game is next week, and certainly I think Corinthians and St Mary's will put a big show. So anyone who's thinking of where to go, that sounds like the game to go and have a look at.
When you do speak to people about Manx football and the Canada Life Premier League, one thing that I've heard quite a few times is that Corinthians have got bags and bags of talent. The potential to go all the way, but sometimes they just lack bottle in the big games. Is that fair to say? Do you think they've got some critics to silence next week?
I don't think they're worried about the critics. Bottle, I think they've got tons of bottle. I think the one that we've always looked at, a leader, someone who can, when the chips are down, sort of pick it up. And, when I look at Luke Murray, year before last, Luke was absolutely terrific. And last year, he had a bit of a quiet season. But again, the first couple of games I saw at the start of this season, I thought Luke's back on fire. When you look at Darren Kane, Darren spent a lot of the time last year playing in the combination, and Darren's Mr. Consistent, and this year in the first team he's done really well. Ronan McDonald on that right-hand side as well has found his position. And when you look at people like this Phil Kelly, you've also got other players, Colin Campbell, who can come in there. It's really good, but it's that midfield. Tom Callister, when we had that great run 2 years ago, Tom was instrumental in that middle with Connor. Tom's been injured now for nearly 2 years, but Fraser Vaughan came from Laxey, and a lot of people were unsure how Fraser would slot in. He has big time over the last sort of 6 months. And Dan Simpson was a huge loss. But at the moment, I think everybody's working hard to cover that space on that left-hand side. And with Sean Doyle, Steve Whitley in really good form, and Josh Riding's back to his best, then it looks really good. But, St Mary's are still, I think, slightly favourites. And when you look at the class outfit that they've got there, it's going to take some beating to take that trophy away from St Mary's.